Hey, welcome to episode 220. I am so happy to dive with you on this subject of blame versus responsibility. Hugely passionate about this. And recently, I've been thinking a lot about the difference between those two because one, I have found myself in blaming mode quite often, and I have found it is very subtle and discreet. But when I think about the feelings I have after certain interactions, I realized that I felt disempowered because I was blaming. And that's me being completely transparent. You know, we go through phases in life where we master some things and we let go of some others. And I can certainly, self-reflect. And as I was being coached, noticed that I personally had been down the path of blame almost unbeknown to me, but I was highly aware of the feeling of disempowerment. And aside from my own personal momentaneously experience with blame and responsibility, I also wanted to bring to your awareness this subject because I coach on this quite a bit. So you as a powerhouse type A overachiever probably struggle making mistakes, not doing things perfectly. And I would care to say that a default for you might also be turning to blame before turning to responsibility. Obviously, if you are achieving great things, at some point you do take responsibility for what belongs to you. But you might have that default at some point where you blame, like I've been doing lately, and to no benefit to anyone. So I thought, this is an episode for you and for me. You're welcome. Trust me, it's going to be a life changer or game changer for you. And I'm going to also give you actionable steps that right after you're done with this episode, you've got some techniques that you can go and apply as the week evolves. So happy Monday. Let's dive in. So let me take a quick pause here from this episode. Before we dive into today's episode, here's a transformative opportunity that you do not want to miss. Guess what's back? You guessed it? Yes, our 5-day Detox the Mind program. Think of this like a boot camp. From feeling self-critical to radiating self-confidence. Empower yourself in just 5 days. No more clouded thoughts or second guessing. It's time to unlock your unstoppable you. What a great way to end this year. So what can you expect from these 5 days together? Proven techniques to silence your inner critic, powerful mindfulness practices to refresh your mindset, and of course, all of my expert research-based insights to reawaken your self-belief. All of this tailor-made for high-achieving women who are ready to level up. Best thing is the price. It's $97 for what? 5 hours of my time. So I think with the exception of one day this time around, we're there at noon, Monday to Friday for a full hour where I'll teach you. And guess what? I'll coach you. You have a chance to ask me questions. We keep it somewhat of a smaller group so that everybody gets a chance to be coached. If you want to, you can also just come in to listen to the teaching and listen to me coach everybody else. So tap into the best version of yourself. Join us now. The program will start live October 23rd to October 27th. It will be recorded and you have access to the recording for a week. So when you pay the $97, you have access to it live and the recording for 1 week. Why only 1 week? Because I know my people, and when you buy something that you have limitless access to, you end up never ever accessing this information. It happened to me this summer. I gave access to people indefinitely, and I went to check and only 5 of them from like 40 plus had actually gone to review the content. So you get it for 1 week. You have me live for 5 hours. You have the chance to be coached by me, ask me questions. If you've ever been wondering what it's like to work with me, this is such a great opportunity to do it at a really low cost. If you are friends with somebody who is working with me currently, ask them for their code. They all have a discount code, which brings the program to $27, a perk for being friends with people I coach. So stay with us. We'll jump right back into this episode shortly. I am also very excited to let you know that for the remaining of this year, I am opening new spots for private coaching. So you'll hear more about it throughout the episode, but I want you to stay attentive, because if subjects like this one speak to you, you're going to probably really enjoy being coached by me. And you might not want to do group coaching, which is what I mostly offer. And right at this moment, I am opening the spot for some private coaching. You don't have to be in Canada. You don't have to be in North America. You can be anywhere, because all my coaching is done through Zoom. And so we get to see each other, we get to know each other. And private coaching has a lot of great benefits, like you get to dictate what you're going to be coached on, and the speed in which you want to make progress. So you don't have to be necessarily held back by anyone or anything. Okay, but let's just briefly talk about why is it important, especially for high achieving perfectionist women and leaders, to talk about responsibility versus blame. I sort of mentioned it at the intro that many of us have a bit of a hard time failing, whatever we interpret as failure. That could be making mistakes. That could be giving feedback that we can do better. Generally, not meeting the mark that we expected for ourselves and or for others. That could be something very triggering for the perfectionist women. And so generally speaking, when we are operating under fixed mindset, which is the opposite of what we want, growth mindset, during fixed mindset, we tend to think that we should know all things and we should be perfect at all things from the get-go. And under that mindset, which is clearly limited, that's why it's called fixed, the opportunity to learn from our mistakes is missed entirely. And normally, this is when we react to those scenarios poorly by blaming others. And this victimizes us. And we are powerhouse women. We are leaders. We are achievers, we are strong women, and we must become aware when we're in blaming mode so that we can switch that around into responsibility, which, by the way, will give you a sense of empowerment. So I started by sharing with you that over the last few weeks, I've been noticing that I feel disempowered, especially in certain aspects of my life. And when I decided to be coach on that, I realized that I was feeling disempowered because I wasn't taking responsibility for what belongs to me. Instead, I was pointing the finger and sort of letting the other parties involved be the ones to dictate whether or not this gets resolved. And I was doing so by blaming them. Had they not done this? Had they done what they were supposed to? And trust me, over the years, I've done this with my teammates, so my assistant or my podcast producer, anything that doesn't go as planned, my instant reaction would be to be blameful. And it's not because I lack responsibility. It's not that for you either, but because I want a quick solution and I am allergic to failure, right? So that's like the default thinking. Now, the more you practice being on growth mindset, the more you're a coach, you become really resilient to looking inwards to what belongs to you and choose responsibility over blame. So especially for us who are in leading positions, who have others looking at us as an example, as a role model, whether that is your teammates, your entire company, or your children, it's important for us to become aware of when we're blaming versus using responsibility. And I'm going to give you a very quick example of how I blamed and then switch around to responsibility this weekend, even as parenting. As easy as it is to say, take responsibility for ourselves, it's also easy to blame. So I was having a hormonal day, not feeling great about myself, not feeling great in my body, made all kinds of poor choices with food. My body was bloated. And my son was being a normal 4-year-old, literally normal behavior that I see all the time, except that this time around, for all the things I mentioned, I had zero patience, not even a little bit, just no patience. So it ended up in him and I having a lot of confrontations that we wouldn't have had I been more patient, had I not been hormonal, had I not made all the choices that led me to feel moody. But in a moment in time, I chose to blame him for my mood. And I would do that, like I said, subtly. It could be like, you're misbehaving today and I'm losing my patience. To which I apply some of the tools that I'm about to teach you. And I was able to reflect back on what belonged to me, which was all of it. And come back to my son and apologize and tell him I was moody, not his fault. To which he answered, not my fault? He was surprised. And you know what else he did? He said, don't worry, Mom, I'll help you the rest of the day. What? I am genuinely impressed by the human I gave birth to. He's just so sweet. And his kindness reminded me that taking responsibility is always the high road, the better road to take. Okay. So it's just a quick example of how blame can just so easily, come into our lives and take over, and we can easily ignore it and not be aware that, oh crap, yes, I just utilized blame as my response to something not going the right way. It is human. I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. It is human. However, as women who claim to be the CEOs of our own life, we can let this go unnoticed and not do something about it. So blame, we were to define it like everyday language, I would say blame is pointing the finger at something outside of ourselves as the root cause of a problem. And when you think about what is the purpose of blame, I suppose is to find a solution to the problem, right? Like, where was the problem and how do we get to resolve the problem? But normally the way we blame is to be judgmental or accusatory, as opposed to like genuinely interested in the problem solving. So when you blame somebody, you're just justifying how you're feeling and why you've made mistakes. And that's it. Zero responsibility. So blame to my own understanding, is the absence of responsibility, personal responsibility. It is awful to be blamed. Don't you agree? Has anybody ever blamed you? It is terrible to be blamed, especially when the blame doesn't fit in. You didn't do the thing and you're being blamed. And blame normally because it is the avoidance of responsibility of the other person who's not thinking, what did I do here? How am I responsible? Like, what's my doing in this context? Then the person who's being blamed feels misunderstood, not heard, not seen, not trusted, but also violated, right? Like, what? What about you? So when we end up blaming and pointing the finger, we don't receive back a super understanding human. We receive back somebody really defensive. Even my 4-year-old will be defensive if I'm blaming him. Obviously, what do you do when you're blamed? You put the person in the position to defend themselves, not to dialogue, not to problem solve. So keep that in mind. Blame does not lead to solution to the problem or to a dialogue. It leads to defensiveness. And so if that person is defending themselves, then you get into a power struggle. Nobody's backing out because it's like we're losing the fight. Now let's talk about responsibility. In the context of this episode, responsibility would be having the self-awareness and the maturity and the courage to say, this belongs to me. This is where I have made a misstep, a mistake, and that belongs to me. And this is how I would do it differently. And if you were to have a conversation with somebody from that perspective, the conversation this morning didn't do as good, didn't go as well because I was already in a bad mood and I came in with an attitude. You could then address how that person talked to you if they talked to you poorly. But now it's coming from a place of conversation where you're taking responsibility, and that invites the other person to also take responsibility, not to be defensive, but actually open. So the emotional undertone of blame, it's guilt, is fear-based, and it serves no helpful purpose. Think about it. When you're blaming the weather as to why you didn't go somewhere, you're not actively and proactively thinking of solutions next time that's the same goal, or weather continues to interfere with the same goal. You're just like, well, excusing yourself. It makes you feel disempowered. And like, if you're like me, sometimes you just become aware of the feeling that feels heavy and you're like, oh, what was happening? What was the thinking behind? Okay. So blame comes accompanied by the feeling of disempowerment and frustration, because when you disempower yourself, then you're waiting for external factors to make it right for you. You're waiting for an apology. You're waiting for somebody to take ownership and alleviate you from your own feelings of whatever went wrong. It's almost like when you're blaming, you're giving up on a solution. If you want to think of it that way. Now, when you take responsibility, you have an emotional undertone of neutrality. You might still feel bad about the outcome of things that brought you to pay attention to what was for you to do, what was your part, but it will definitely empower you. How so? Because when you go back to the events that didn't go the right way and you notice, oh, I know why I fell down the steps. I missed the last 2 steps. I went from 1, 2, 3 to like the ground and I wasn't paying attention. Yes, you're taking responsibility, not blame, responsibility for what belongs to you that nobody else can fix. That was you're doing. And then the empowerment comes, which is you get to decide what are you going to do next time you're going down the same steps. And that feels empowered. That feels empowering, because then you get to say, this is what I can do next time. Normally, when you're blaming, you feel victimized in that, this happened to me. When you take responsibility, you're like, although this happened to me, this is what I can do about it. I get to choose how I respond to what happens to me. Okay, so time for a quick reality check. If today's topic is striking a chord and you are ready to level up, my private coaching program is designed for you. It's called Align, specifically tailored for driven executive business owners, busy men and women. It is the only program I open for men as well because it's private. And we dive deep into mindset shifts and communication, making sure that your choices, like the title of the program says, align. What you want, what you see for your future, what you feel is all in alignment with what you're saying and doing. Now, I've got limited spots. So if you want to find out more about it, head over to the show notes and book a quick free discovery call. It's 15 minutes, you and I talking about what you want to improve, what you want to make progress on, what you want to master. And I get to tell you whether or not Align will be a good program for you. This could be 3 months coaching, 6 months coaching, private coaching, where we meet either on a bi-weekly basis or a weekly basis. So you have some choices there. And I would absolutely love to help you get a spot in my private coaching, because I don't know when the next spots will be available again. All right, so let's talk about why this sense of responsibility versus blaming matters to women who are high achievers, and especially who are leading, whether you're leading a whole team, an organization, or your family. When you're blaming, when your default response is to blame, you are creating relationships where nobody takes responsibility. And I don't need to tell you what happens to a team or a family or a relationship where nobody is taking responsibility for their own actions. It collapses. Blaming leads to a collapsation. So you want to make sure that you're taking responsibility for your actions, because you are role modeling for others how to own up to what could have and could improve. I want you to think of this taking responsibility not as guilt tripping yourself, as some of my clients might see it, or punishing yourself and making it be like you were bad, slap yourself on the hand, but rather as a sign of strength. Somebody with the vision and the willingness to evaluate and always up-level themselves. From the perspective of growth mindset, we see mistakes, mishaps, when things go wrong, as an opportunity to learn and eventually grow. So each time you are making a mistake, you notice like, oh crap, that was on me. I could have. Each time you're asking yourself the question, okay, what could I have possibly done, even if I believe I've done everything the right way? What could I have possibly done to prevent this from happening? You are opening your brain to possibilities. You are learning the next step of success. Next time you run this, you have a much better possibility of success because you've made the mistakes before. And you're like, okay, I'm going to give a go to this course of action. By doing so, you begin to sit in comfort with growth mindset, which enables you to grow indefinitely. There is nothing that is going to block your growth if you become comfortable with taking responsibility for what belongs to you. It's a sign of humbleness, especially when you have a leader, or if you're a leader that can own up to their mistakes with compassion without poor talking about themselves. If you are the leader who shows up to a meeting and says, okay, this project went south and I want to start with what I could have done better. You as a leader will feel empowered. Your team is going to feel empowered to want to do the same thing and recognize like, oh my God, she's nitpicking at her own doing. Wow, that's amazing. They will admire you and the relationship wins. Whether that's with your team, your marriage, your child. When I modeled for my son what it was like to come back and apologize and remove the blame I had placed on him and his behavior, I liberated him from something that didn't belong to him. I took ownership for my behavior. And I've now gave him permission and role model the importance of looking back to our wrongs with sincerity, genuinely, and with that freedom that comes from saying, yeah, I could have done better. And here's my plan to do better. Like, he probably felt a million, like, even though he's 4, I know subconsciously he was probably feeling guilty because mama was in a bad mood because he wasn't behaving. So imagine doing this with your team. Imagine just walking into a meeting after a project has been completed and it didn't go as planned. Maybe you got evaluated poorly. Maybe the outcome of the project did not come through. Maybe you had to make sales, a certain amount of sales, and you guys totally messed that up, didn't happen. And the lead in that project shows up, first and foremost, thanking everybody for their effort and going deep into what that person, to begin with, could have done differently and will do differently. Just think about being in that meeting. How will you then feel about your own self? You would likely do the same. Okay, yeah, so I did great. This worked well, but this could have been done differently or better. Opportunity for growth. So much more productive than pointing the finger at the person who delayed the project, at the weather, at the system that collapsed just as we were going to get whatever, the system live. Blame generally and ultimately is not helpful. Taking responsibility offers possibilities. And I know if you are a high achieving individual, you care about progress. Blame offers zero progress, nada. Whereas taking responsibility makes the other person or team feel important too. It validates, it allows them to just make mistakes as long as we're learning. A mistake that we learn from, it's a gain for success. A mistake that we ignore and blame others for, it's the complete opposite. It destroys a part of you and the relationship. And it offers you zero progress. So that's what this matters. Now, your decision-making, your team morale, your personal growth, your relationships will all benefit when you choose actively responsibility versus blame. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to blame. You're going to have this feeling of disempowerment. You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to go back down, like, why am I feeling this way? What's causing me to feel this way? You're going to notice that you were blaming, and you're not now going to blame yourself because you were blaming before, but you're going to course correct by taking ownership. And you take ownership by doing one of these strategies I'm about to teach you. You learn, you have your key to success next time. So let's dive into actionable steps that you can right away walk away from this episode to implement. First, self-audit exercise. I want you to do a self-audit for 1 week. Track instances where you find yourself blaming others or circumstances. Write them down, then ask yourself, what could I have done differently here? This exercise moves you from a reactive to a proactive mindset. So important. Actually, do take the time to do this, okay? We'll do it together. It's just so much fun to do it, to have something to work on. Step number 2 is to implement a pause and a reflect rule. What does that look like? Next time you do something that goes the wrong way, before you react, take a 50-second pause and use that time to breathe and shift your mindset from blame to responsibility. And trust me, those 60 seconds can be transformative. Now my clients are like, how do I remember to take the 60-second when I am upset about the mistake? I'm immediately in blaming mode. Whenever you become aware that you have gone down the path of blame, if you've set the intention to take responsibility, just think how differently you will show up to your marriage, to your parenting, to your boss, to your team, if you're not defensive and blameful. But if you open up with like, this is what I've done wrong, I get it, this is what I'm going to do differently. So use those 60 seconds to really pause and reflect. You might even want to write it in a sticky note, pause and reflect as a reminder of this rule. And the third technique, I'm going to give you 5. The third technique I want to give you is master 2 questions. This is the master 2 question technique. After any significant event or meeting, ask yourself these 2 questions. What did I do well? And what will I do differently next time? This engages both self-praise and self-responsibility, reinforcing positive behavior. Like, for example, after a season of the podcast, I will ask myself, what did I do well in this season? And what would I do differently next time? And it makes me look into data, like what did you guys listen to most? What was the episodes I got the most feedback on? What was mostly shared? And it gives me ideas for next time. This is what I will do differently. I actually listen to all of my episodes, all of them. Monday comes, I play my episodes. I am the first one to listen to my own product because only this way can I improve it. Can I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of these episodes? And so much of the things that I improve or implement comes from that ability to say, okay, what did I do well here? And what will I do differently? Get addicted to these 2 questions because they can be life-changing. Step number 4, develop a responsibility mantra. You guys know I'm a huge fan of having language involved in how we operate. And so call it a mantra, call it a recurring phrase, whatever you want to, like a positive, phrase. I'm looking for a word that is not coming to me. This could be super helpful to you as you are working intentionally on becoming more responsible. So for example, one of the ones I love using, especially with my child and husband, is always like the closest people that is easiest to blame. In my experience, you could have a different experience. I am in charge of how I react. And I repeat it all the time, especially when I find myself slipping into blame. So create a short mantra such as I am in charge of how I react and repeat it when you find yourself going into the blame route. Mantras are powerful subconscious reminders that can reset your mindset. This is why I'm a big fan of utilizing language. This is why I teach things like detox the mind, reset your mindset, because I like to give you tools that your brain can easily associate to change the mind. And so a mantra is one of those ways to do that. And lastly, look for accountability. It's incredible, but we love to get the happy face sticker at the end of an accomplishment. We like to know that we're doing good. First of all, going down the route of taking responsibility as opposed to assuming blame takes you out of victim mode, makes you the creator of your own results, of your own life experiences. Reminds you that you are powerful indeed, that you get to choose the experience, the feelings you want to have out of any life event. But it also makes you feel that you can be accountable to others and that nothing can face you to the point that, it will be too much for you to take on. So having an accountability coach or partner, somebody with whom you can report your progress or setbacks in adopting responsibility and give you outside perspectives often reveals like blind spots that you would have missed otherwise. This is what I do for my clients, and I think we love it. We celebrate these successes and also like what could have done better or what haven't they seen. So when my clients tell me, and it happens often, and maybe this happens to you, suddenly, I was able to handle that without anxiety. It came out of nowhere. Thankfully, my curious mind doesn't let them get away with a statement or they're not taking responsibility for what steps were taken that led them to the result, the desired result. And I always reminded it didn't come out of nowhere. And so I always ask my clients to come back into their own self-development process and programming, what they've been working towards, and realize that although it feels like a sudden change in mindset, it wasn't. They've been working on it. And suddenly it feels easier, yes, but after they've put a lot of effort. So having an accountability coach allows you to celebrate your progress, but continue to look into like blind spots, which fast forwards your progress so much faster than if you're doing this on your own. So seeking that accountability is highly, highly encourageable for you, especially if you do know that blame is your thing. You tend to shy away from taking responsibility because you hate the feeling of inadequacy, which is what your brain right now understands as taking responsibility, or saying out loud, I've made a mistake. Your brain thinks like they will think I'm not, what's the word? They will think I'm not competent. They will think I am inadequate. And then your brain offers you a whole bunch of drama. But think about it. Showing up big enough to recognize what you could have done better and with a plan of what you're going to do better is always so well received. It's a sign of strength, and it liberates everybody from this idea of having to be perfect. Just think of it for a moment. You are leading somebody. You may have a manager that you are managing. You may have teammates. You may have a team that you're leading. You may have a family member, a husband. You may have a child, a teenage. Think for a moment that they come to you and say, Mom, wife, boss, you know, when you gave me feedback and I blamed you back and I walk away, I wasn't taking responsibility. I think next time I will leave the clothes in the laundry room. It makes sense. That was on me. How will you feel being on the receiving end? And if you would like that, just notice that anybody will like that. That will be positively seen as opposed to what your brain tells you. Your brain tells you everybody's going to think, what a weak person. He or she is like accepting the guilt. They did it, the blame. They are guilty. Nobody thinks that way. When you show up taking full-on ownership, you're not creating a sense of defensiveness. You're just being so genuinely and vulnerable that people think and see through you. They appreciate it. They feel closer to you. You become more relatable, easier to trust, and you create a bond, a very special bond. So there you have it. That is the difference between taking responsibility and blaming. I really wanted to explain to you why blame sometimes is so attractive to us, especially as high achievers. We want to achieve, and anything that is not achieving in the right direction feels like a setback, and we almost want to ignore it, but that is to our detriment, our project's detriment, our family's detriment, to have the ability to stop and think and evaluate what went wrong and what could I do do differently. You're probably really skilled at noticing in other people, this is what you've done wrong, this is what you missed, and this is what you can do differently. And it's zero effective when it comes from somebody else's perspective versus from the person themselves. So if you're managing people or your child or your spouse, ask them, what do you think went wrong here? Not what did you do wrong? What do you think went wrong here? And what do you think each of us can do differently? What a powerful question. I wanna remind you that of this, I might have said in other episodes, but I just really love this question when it comes to problem solving and you're in blaming mode. If they're not the problem, he, she, they, and I'm not the problem, then what is the problem? Because when we are jointly solving for the problem, the relationship wins. Okay, so like stay with that. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope to see some of your names signed up for a free discovery call and talk about coaching, private coaching for the remaining of the year with you. Would absolutely love the opportunity to coach you. All questions you have, you can see them on my website, the answers, or simply just book the call. It's absolutely not pressure at all. You're not calling this 15 minutes and signing up right away. I am quite picky. I don't think my system works for everybody. And I don't see it as like, this is when you sign up. This is when you get to know me and I get to know you. And we jointly get to see if this is a good match for you. I hope it is. And if it is, then I make you an offer. And it's up to you at that point to also decide if you want to be coached by me or not. All right, you guys, that is it. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.